Welcome back. Welcome to this news review segment in our news bulletin. I have as my esteemed guest Mr. DeBar, radio host and journalist of CPR News, joining us from New York, and also Sakina, Datoo, producer, author and journalist, joining us from London. I'm going to start the conversation with Mr. DeBar here. Mr. DeBar, why has the Trump administration chosen to escalate its confrontation with the ICC by sanctioning the court's president with and a senior trial lawyer? What is Washington ultimately trying to achieve? Ms. Sakina Datoo, please you answer the question, as we are still trying to reconnect with Mr. DeBar.
I think, it is quite obvious that what the US is doing is trying to erode the multilateral system of international law. But then again, this is not the first time. If you look at the previous term of President Trump, he has done something very similar. He has always had a problem with respecting the autonomy of the ICC or any kind of an international ruling. In every manner, we see that he defies and tries to ensure that the US does not comply. I mean, for example, in the past, he has tried to pass this American Service Members Protection Act or the Hague Invasion Act to ensure that if there are any US personnel that are detained by the court, then there is instant release for them. And specifically, I think what is happening right now will depend. There are some member states who are opposing this, but it depends on how many of them and how strongly they really decide to challenge this, because otherwise it genuinely doesn't have a meaning. In 2020, the US had also sanctioned ICC at that time when there was a war crimes investigation into US personnel's role in Afghanistan. And at that time, he also tried to keep this under wraps by sanctioning ICC. But it was 88 member states in 15 joint statements that opposed this so strongly that Biden, when he came in 2021, he had to revoke. And therefore, it really depends, I think, at the moment on what the response of the member states is going to be. I know some of them have condemned, but then, just verbally condemning is different from really taking action. And we are in very difficult times, I think, when every international institution is collapsing because the US just wants to do, police the entire world just how they see it fit. So I think a lot rests on how member states are going to react to these sanctions.
Right, Mr. DeBar, very good to have you on this news review segment. The ICC is arguing that targeting judges and prosecutors for merely applying the law puts the international legal order at risk. How serious is this threat to the principle of judicial independence?
It's like trying to bury almost a dead person already. If you look at two cases that have been winding through the two courts, the ICC, and that deals with individuals who commit, in this case, war crimes, and the International Court of Justice, which is appended to the United Nations, which deals with state actors. Both in the case of South Africa versus Israel, for example, for the actual, forget the legal terminology, when you're trying to kill all of the people, that's genocide in everyday language, or almost every language on the planet. For the actual genocide in Gaza, and the ICC, that case, South Africa versus Israel, has produced arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant, and I think someone else, back in November of 2024. They have not been executed yet. Netanyahu has visited places where, in fact, they were signatories to the Rome Statute, which means that the ICC has jurisdiction, and those parties were absolutely obligated to arrest them, but they did not do that. The United States did not ratify the Rome Statute creating the ICC. It has referred almost every oppositional figure to the empire in Africa, for example, for prosecution to the ICC. It uses it as a weapon wherever it can, but for some reason doesn't recognize its validity. Then there is the International Court of Justice, where there's a case by Ukraine against the Russian Federation, and there's the case of South Africa versus Israel case actually resounds. And so both of those cases came with a request for emergency relief. Now, the Ukraine case is actually suing Russia because they claimed falsely that there was a genocide being committed by Ukraine. In the case with Gaza, there was an actual ongoing genocide on television every night. In each case, they decided not to issue emergency relief, and those cases are now on a litigation track that will take several years. So for the U.S. to sanction any of these courts, really, while the U.S. is manipulating the outcome of almost every case that goes in, through, and out of them, seems like overkill for public relations. It certainly will chill anyone at either of these courts to know that if they have an apartment in one of the countries that the U.S. can reach with sanctions, it can be taken, that their children can be expelled from college or whatever. Yeah, it does chill, yes.
Right. Ms. Sakina Datoo, the American argument is that the US has never accepted the jurisdiction of the ICC and therefore cannot be bound by its decisions. The question here is that how strong is that argument on the international law right now, particularly when alleged crimes are occurring in the territory of a member of the ICC jurisdiction?
Well, okay, so we're talking about war crimes
excuse
and genocide.
me, Don. It's a question for Ms. Sakina Datoo.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think there is absolutely no jurisdiction. I mean, how can the US be exempt from what is applicable on everybody else, on the rest of the world? This is the same, mentality they have, that they think they are supreme and that they are above everybody else. Why should they be excused when everybody else has to obey these international laws? But the issue here is that we are really going now into this arena whereby this is very, very dangerous for all member states. If we reach a stage whereby we are now employing the law of the jungle, that there is no such thing as an international law, whenever it suits the US, basically it's not even the US, whenever it suits Israel, because behind this decision, of course it's Israel. It's to do with Netanyahu, and that is the reason why Trump is opposing this ICC. It has always been about the Zionist state and their white supremacist ideology of thinking that they are God's chosen people and therefore nothing applies to them. The rest of us have got one rule for us, and the US and Israel are above everybody else. This is dangerous for everybody. Tomorrow, for example, if Trump was to attack and take control of Greenland, for example, where does that leave us, in Europe? And in every part of the world, in the Middle East, in West Asia, we've already seen what happens when people are not taking their own security, putting forefront. And this is why we've seen all the Gulf states, for example, being bombarded, because they decided to stay with the US. And I think this is a warning for the other parts of the world too. In particular, for me, this is about Europe taking note that the US has gone, to the levels. Now, of course, like I said, this is not the first time Trump has attempted to do this, but it's always to do with Israel. Even the first in the 2020, this was because Israel was involved in some of the war crimes in Afghanistan. I think the world is really sick and tired of making exceptions for this Zionist entity. When it is to do with them, all of us have to be the ones taking backseat and allowing them to live by different rules to any of us. I think if the member states really don't take some strong measures and ensure that these sanctions don't take place, and also these sanctions, we must remember, they make life of people like Karim Khan, who is one of those under these sanctions, very, very difficult. Just like Francesca, not able to leave, not having bank accounts. They're really putting people in difficulties simply because they oppose the Zionist state.
Right, Don, we are seeing the US taking even a further step here. Marco Rubio has reportedly called for the ICC member states to withdraw from the court. Could the US realistically weaken or dismantle even the ICC by pressuring its 125 member states?
It's a difficult question to answer. First of all, Rubio is pursuing what's been a goal of the serious right wing, the real fascist right wing that exists in the United States, that existed before, during, and after World War II. And that is, as soon as the UN Charter was signed, to dismantle it. The idea, the slogan was get the U.S. out of the UN and the UN out of the U.S. since Joe McCarthy's days. The various institutional structures for administering international law and international relations run contrary to the will of those people who believe this planet and everyone on it and everything on it belongs to them, and that they have some divine mission that they deemed themselves to be worthy of, and that they must pursue at all costs. The courts themselves are almost useless in terms of actual impact because of the raw state of power, military power on the planet. The idea that no matter what the President of the United States did, for example, that someone could come and take him out of the White House, in chains, is ridiculous, outside of perhaps a coup by the Pentagon or the CIA. And so when you see and finally, even here in the courts in the United States, you can see the absurdity of the claims of a rule of law that where the courts and the process generally hide behind two different concepts. One is standing, in other words, having the right to bring a case in the court in the first place, which is very limited and under very limited circumstances, and that applies to these courts as well. And the other is jurisdiction. When the court doesn't want to rule the way the law says it should rule, and the way common sense says it should rule, and the way the public relations in the society says it should rule, it just says that we lack the jurisdiction to do that. You can look at the two cases I cited, Ukraine v. Russian Federation, South Africa v. Israel. Just compare them to each other. Think of the severity of the things here. Ukraine's case, they sued Russia because they said they made false claims of genocide to justify an invasion. So that's how they invoked the genocide laws. South Africa and Israel's committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza because on a daily basis, really going back to 2006,
right,
when they started starving them, they've been doing that.
Right, and Ms. Sakina Datoo, Japan has described the sanctions against one of its citizens, Mr. Tomoko Akana, the ICC president, as very unfortunate. Also, we've had the likes of the Netherlands and some European countries condemning these sanctions against the ICC and supporting the court. Could this issue create a serious fracture between the America, the US, and its allies, traditional allies?
Well, I certainly hope that it does. I mean, I don't know how strong the allies are, but I think when it comes to international law, I think people take it a bit more seriously, member states. On one hand, we do talk about the fact that these United Nations, agencies don't really have a teeth. They just condemn and they take out statements. I mean, the whole world has watched a genocide unfold and not been able to do anything other than, just a word of mouth here and there, some condemnation. However, there is a precedence when it comes to serious matters of ICC and international law. The member states can, if there is enough railing around and if there is enough push from the ordinary people, then the member states would oppose this. And I think we are reaching there. I think most of the member states are really sick and tired with this Trump in particular, not just even Israel, but US, but Trump's US in particular. So I do have a feeling that this is going to come to heads on, and I think there will be a lot more member states coming around, together and opposing the US, which can definitely create that fracture. And we need this fracture, to be honest, because US is dragging the entire world down with this exclusionist idea of how they treat themselves and the Zionist state.
Right, and Don, I'm going to ask about some argument that is being repeated a lot these days, and that is the fact that the US and Israel are not parties to the Rome Statute. And does that fact undermine the ICC's legitimacy in pursuing alleged crimes involving Israeli officials?
It complicates it. It doesn't undermine it, but it does complicate it. You have the two courts handle two different areas, really. One court handles claims against individuals, and the other claims against nation states. And so, for example, the claim at the ICJ, where South Africa said Israel's committing genocide against Palestinians, there were some things where they went into the fact of whether or not these were acts of war and war crimes and things that would go against individuals and in the ICC. And the bottom line was, well, we can't consider those questions because Hamas is not a state actor. And so we'd be in a position of asking Israel to stop, in place, to stop killing people, basically, whereas we could not order Hamas to do that. There's like all these formalistic, legalistic, nonsensical arguments that shroud the entire process from the public. They generate headlines when a ruling comes out that the West uses to show equivalency or worse in two cases that have nothing to do with each other. And so it's a really difficult, there's a really difficult path to using any of these venues to actually secure people sitting in a city of what used to be 2 million people in an open air prison camp for now, 20 years since 2006? And this case against Israel is on a track where a final ruling, it says, will likely occur in the early 2030s.
Thank you so much. Indeed, a pleasure to have you both on this news review segment of our news bulletin. Mr. Don DeBar and Miss Sakina Datoo, thank you so much wholeheartedly. And with that, we come to the end of this news review program and also this news bulletin. Thank you so much for staying with us on Press TV.